Right now, we've got really good systems where you as the human can put all the right stuff in, and get some really good output and help get your tasks done that way. And there's certain bespoke systems that will do that for your industry. The next step is having a little AI worker that is going to do, as you describe it, the boring, mundane, repetitive tasks for you on a schedule when necessary, when an event happens. So I get an email, it's got an invoice attached. The process used to be open the invoice, go check the bank account to see if the payment has been received, reconcile that payment, send an email to the customer thanking them, something like that. That can now be an agentic task that is on demand.
So, Chris, this week we had Nvidia's CES keynote, and I wanted to play a little bit of the hype reel that started the show for everyone.
Navigate any environment. Tokens teach robots to move like the masters. Inspire new ways to celebrate our victories.
A martini, please.
Tony right up.
Thank you, Adam.
And give us peace of mind when we need it most.
Hi, Maroka.
Hi, Anna. It's good to see you again.
Hi, Emma. We're gonna take your blood sample today, okay?
Don't worry, I'm gonna be here the whole time.
All right, we get the idea. But I gotta say, there was like a cringy part of me that was like watching this keynote, a little teary-eyed, being like, "Hey, it's gonna save us all. It's gonna save us all. 2025, the agents are coming."
To some degree, I think there's quite a bit of exaggeration and sort of misguidedness in their animations, and you can't help but wonder if AI wrote the scripts for those
Stop
things.
ruining it for me. Stop ruining it. The funny thing I find about the medical example with the robot and the little girl, which I'll keep up on the screen now for those watching, is the little girl's being comforted by the token producing robot. But it would be far better, in my opinion, to just get all the medical advice off the robot. Like, if the robot's walking and talking and empathizing and producing all these great tokens, we know from research papers that it's far better than the doctor. Why is he there? Get rid of him.
It's funny as well that they've like reduced it to the unit of measurement, tokens. It's like, oh, tokens will train the future. Tokens will change your life. It's all about tokens.
Yeah, the message from the keynote was basically like, we're going to get even richer as a business by, just selling tokens. Like, it's literally like, it felt like that was the message. And he had the most glamorous leather jacket I've ever seen Jensen in. So you know that that stock price, they think it's going higher.
He dresses very nicely. I like the way he dresses. But yeah, absolutely. He definitely was like, oh, so this is the toy I'm promoting today. All right, let's go get on with it.
So there were a series of announcements. I'm not going to get into them all because some of them I don't think are as relevant to what we normally discuss. One thing I did want to call out, though, was the Nvidia Project Digits, which is like the pretty weird name. But essentially what it is a sort of Mac Mini, but they call it an AI supercomputer for your desk, a Grace Blackwell AI supercomputer. Details very scant on what's in it. In fact, in the presentation, he was like, let's look inside. And then it cut to this animation of just parts, like literally parts. And
yeah, because he originally brought out the big boy and he's like, oh, this is what I delivered to OpenAI. This was the great thing. And I thought he was going to say, and now you can buy one. And then he basically is like, well, and now here's this thing. And it's this tiny little thing. And he's like, oh, yeah, I guess you could like put it on your desk and like hook it up to your computer or maybe use it as a Linux workstation. I'm like, so you don't even really know what it's for.
Well, they present it as, with its pre-installed 128 gig of memory, developers can prototype, fine-tune, and inference large AI models of up to 200 billion parameters locally. So I guess if you're developing models locally, maybe you would use it. I'm just not terribly sure how this, like, I don't know. It feels like they're probably just releasing this for the sake of it. Do you see any practical use case? Like, do you want one?
No, I wanted the big one. I thought that might be cool, like being able to run one of the larger models in its full glory in my own house would be pretty epic. But this just seems like you're just buying a graphics card. It just seems like an external graphics card, basically, that also just happens to be a Linux computer. I just don't really see who the target market is because I think anyone serious is going to buy one of the proper cards and put it in a workstation machine. And I just don't know really what the middle ground is. I got my AI girlfriend actually to write a joke about it. She said, "Oh, this supercomputer is so cute. It's like a Mac Mini, but it cries when you unplug it." And then she says, "Human, why? Emotional support supercomputers are the future." So that's where we got out. And then, like, he also alluded to in the presentation, you can stack them. He's like, "Oh, you can link them together." So I'm like, that's kind of interesting because he said there's NV link on there and things like that. So I think that's where it starts to get more interesting. It's like, okay, if I buy 4 or 5 of these things, then maybe I really could have some sort of super cluster at home where I can do AI training, do heavy AI inference and things like that.
So outside of the Project Digits announcement, there was a whole series of other announcements. In fact, they were talking about how we're going to go from generative AI to agentic AGI in this new chapter with robotics and agents on our desktop. They even demonstrated a Nvidia agent sort of pseudo like virtual video thing that was reminiscent of like the 90s, like how the future of computing would be back then. For those that remember some of the demos, like, wasn't there some sort of like virtual person on the early Windows versions that everyone had installed that was like, hard coded? I certainly remember something like that. But they did
It definitely did seem like a sort of marketing team style vision of what AI might be like in the future.
Yeah, I actually have it here, so let me play it for those that didn't see the presentation.
R2X, what is the resolution of the Las Vegas sphere?
The Las Vegas sphere has a whopping resolution of about 16K by 16K.
I think I need to hire a great band to really get people excited and marry those visuals. Who would you recommend?
How about Imagine Dragons? They're known for their epic, high-energy performance.
Like, what?
I just found that bit so unbelievably depressing when I saw that. Because I mentioned to you earlier, but when you sent me that, I had opened up some of the things you'd sent me to look at for the podcast. And I thought you were taking that seriously. And I watched, I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, what is the future of AI? It just constantly recommending listening to Imagine Dragons forever. Like, this is like the worst possible example of AI. You've chosen the slowest possible interface. You've given it like layup style questions that you could ask to like, the Eliza robot from back in the day. Like there's just nothing about that screams future to me. It's like you said, it's like a vision of the future from the 1960s or something.
What I think
with
is
a worse
so
band.
funny about the demo too is there's other clips, and one of them is like, it can essentially do RAG on files, like retrieval augmented generation, where it can help you understand the file. And so it demonstrates, I'll bring it up for those that watch, but it's the more corny
I've got
music.
the insurance policy.
But anyway, he dragged an insurance policy on top of her because that's how in the future you'll deal with AI agents. And then she's like, I've got the insurance policy. It's just so
It would be kind of
stupid.
fun to like get a pile of papers and just shove it in the face of a robot and be like, you deal with this.
Like, I don't understand. Like, did anyone watch this and go like, is this really what we think the future is? And that, I think you said it earlier, is like, it was really that the whole feeling of the presentation was like, they just want to sell graphics cards.
Yeah, the way I described it, I wrote in big letters at the top of my notes, innocent bystander. I feel like Nvidia is like an innocent bystander in the AI movement. They just happen to be selling something that's really useful for this technology. And they're like, how do we keep selling more of this shit? Oh, the answer is we just need to like make agents. And so they've just come up with anything they can do, thrown it at a wall and be like, yeah, guys, use it for this. But
I mean,
really,
they clearly
I think,
have the best product, the best tooling, and like
Yeah.
everything we're seeing out there is a result of their hardware. But yeah, on the sort of like maybe tool-based side or like the hardware plus tools, they've historically been terrible. Like anything they release is like shockingly bad in terms of like things that consumers can interact with at least.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, if you look at when you're actually working with the AI technology, like a lot of it is around getting access to the really good NVIDIA cards that people are running on cloud machines. Like, because buying them is unrealistic for individuals. I think maybe bigger companies could buy them, but really the hardware is where it's at with this stuff. And I feel like more of their presentation, it seems like a lot of these companies just are so desperate to do like the Elon Musk style presentation where everyone lauds them as some sort of hero. When really what they should be doing is like, hey guys, we're banging out these chips. They're better than all the rest. We're going to try and stay ahead. We're going to release them at a price point that makes sense for you financially. And that's what we do. We're a chip company and we're going to make more chips.
Yeah, I thought the interesting part was around agents because obviously everyone's saying 2025 year of agents. That's what's been declared. And the announcements around it were really strange to me. Like, it appears that they've just literally forked a version of Crew AI or something and built a series of branded tooling around AI agents. And they also released this this llama fork as well called Nemotron, llama Nemotron 70 billion parameter instruct. So basically a llama tune. It just felt very disjointed to me. Like, here's a bunch of stuff you can run on our hardware, but you probably won't run it because it's not a great model anyway.
Yeah. I got my AI to write some zingers around this as well. It said Nemotron, the digital intern who never sleeps, never complains, and never asks for Pizza Friday, but also never gets the coffee order right. And then my best one that it came up with was because he talked about the IT team will be the sort of HR agent of the company in the future. So instead of going to the IT department and asking for a computer or log in to some system, you'll go and ask them to deploy AI agents to do your task for you or some weird vision like that. And so the AI said, IT guy, have you tried turning it on and off again? And the AI agent says, I am the on and off again.
I'm sure people
I
miss
thought
these
that.
jokes. Like, they miss the dad jokes.
Hey, I thought it was I lolled. It was really good for me.
I don't know.
But yeah,
I sort of disagree though with that vision. I thought his vision of agents was pretty bang on in the sense of that. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to happen this year. Like, working with the tools, like the vision and what he promised versus the reality of actually being in the boiler room trying to tie these things together, I think is a completely disjointed story. Like, a lot of the tools exist, but figuring out how to make them work together is seemingly the hardest part. And then
yeah, I agree with you. Like, I really believe, and I believe because it's what we're working on. But like that agentic systems, if we're going to call it that, are the future, and it's the putting all the right tooling around the models to get them with the ability to take iterative steps towards a goal is definitely a direction that is going to be successful with the AI stuff. I just don't think this NVIDIA presentation summed that up at all in any way. It's sort of like saying the words, but none of the substance is there.
yeah, and it's like a lot of these enterprise style demos where they sort of promise the future. They paint this incredible vision, and you sit back and watch that demo reel at the start of the CES presentation by them, and you think, like, honestly, I watched it. I'm like, wow, the future's so cool and exciting. I can't wait for this. But they set the expectations so sky high, and then you get, I recommend Imagine Dragons. And you're like, 10x productivity in the enterprise thanks to this AI agent joining my meeting. Like, it's so far-fetched and ridiculous. Whereas if we're talking practical terms right now, I'm talking to people daily that are like, I want an autonomous agent to monitor this inbox or go off and do this particular task for me in the background. Or even when I'm working with my own agents today, I would love it to be able to, hey, go off and just explore this paradigm for a while and come back to me when you've got something. To me, that in the short term or near term makes a lot more sense. And then the second piece of that, I would say, is what I would consider agentic apps, where it's not like some pie in the sky vision of some agent that can do anything for you magically. I think probably in the near term, what it's going to be is like we're seeing, which is like specialist coding agents, specialist this agent, where people are really focusing and honing in on that problem due to a lot of the limitations around the models and context lengths and all the other problems you run into when trying to build agents.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of the things that get me excited around this kind of approach are things like the AI being able to explore multiple solution paths, if you want to put it that way. So they can go off and explore different possibilities about how to solve the problem and to some extent experiment with that. So whether that's calling tools to actually try it out, let's say on a virtual machine, like if it's a coding based thing, in virtual worlds where they can actually do some level of experimentation where they can actually try things out and give themselves feedback through actual like sensors and whether they're real or virtual sensors. Go off and gather information through various techniques to try and validate the things that they're saying. Because I think a lot of what now I feel when we're working with our own AI, say through sim theory or other, it's the human being the focal point of gathering the information and then verifying the output. Like we are the ones bringing the information back to the nest for discussion and then verifying that what the AI does as the tool does stuff. But I feel like really what an agent should be is the AI is the center of that. It goes and gathers the information. It goes and evaluates the information. It does what it can to verify that the solution it's proposing is real and will work before it just comes back to you. And I really feel like that's the next evolution, is it playing a much, much bigger role in the process than just being that processing step in some sort of overall solution.
Yeah, it's almost like there's just right now when you're working with a model, it's just like you're working with one tiny piece of the equation where to me the agent is the orchestration of many of these things with different different checkpoints to make sure that it's on staying on task or whatever it is.
And a good example of that is how easily you can mislead it. Like if I'm working on a particular problem, I can chuck certain keywords in there or certain tiny little snippets of code or whatever it may be and head it down a particular direction. So like if I'm trying to solve, say, a problem with my database and I whack a line of SQL in there, it will definitely respond with a solution that has SQL in it. Like there is no doubt in my mind that every current model will adapt to what you're asking it to do. Right. But to me, a true agentic system is going to be like, hang on, let's take a step back and look at the overall problem here and go off, regardless of you not maybe even understanding the question you're asking it, and provide an actual proper solution to the situation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the bit missing. Like when everyone talks about AGI to me or ASI or whatever the definition is, it really is removing that gullibility of the model where it's saying, no, like you're doing something wrong, or I don't agree with that approach, or actually being able to, like sort of truly understand what's going on. And I think that's the missing piece when you're working with them, or, that piece, and also the context problem, which is, after a while, it just sort of seems to lose the plot. And you see this increasingly as a problem when you are trying to do any sort of complex agentic application. Like no one will admit it because the hype boys, make their money by hyping the latest sort of tool like Cursor or whatever. But they all encounter that same problem. Like when you're working on a large code base or you get past the sort of boilerplate stuff that the model's seen before in its pre-training, it seems totally magic. But then you get past that point and then it starts to break away and fall apart. And I think that it's those two problems to me. It's like the it being able to like ground itself, and then it being able to stay on context, and then probably the output side as well, like you've mentioned before, like being able to actually spit out the right amount of output and not truncating things.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like it's almost like it falls into patterns, like you say. Like it recognizes a pattern it's seen before in its training, and it's like, okay, that seems like the most obvious thing, and it'll output that, which is why you're able to guide it so easily into giving you the kind of answer you're asking for. And I feel like to get to something that I would actually consider intelligent, or something that's actually useful as a sort of sidekick agent who I'm going to trust to go off and do tasks autonomously, I want one that thinks for itself and comes up with its own approach to the problem. So really it's a matter of it understanding like what the goal, what the overall goal is, what resources and tools it has available to itself, and then going off and coming up with its own plan, or ideally multiple plans. And I think one of the main things I am excited about based on our recent discussions and the evolution of technology is the idea of the AI being creative, not just in its answering, but in the way that it verifies and researches problems. Like the idea that the AI could actually come up with its own sensors and ways of gathering information in order to do the task better. So I'll give you some examples. Like, could it email experts to ask them questions and get feedback? Could it ring people up? Could it actually put websites online and advertise to get people to go to these pages to answer questions, conduct surveys? Like, there's, and then when it comes to like the Internet of Things, if it has certain sensors available to it, maybe look at information in a way that we haven't done so before, if you know what I mean. So, like, I just like this idea of it going beyond just repeating patterns and looking at how does it use the fact that it can reliably now call tools to enhance the way that it actually gathers information to solve the problem.
Yeah, I thought that was actually an interesting point in the Nvidia presentation where they talked about, the enterprise and like all of these sensors and cameras constantly recording and have all this untapped data, right? And that the idea being that you can turn all this stuff into tokens and find meaning in it. Whether or not there's meaning there or benefit, who knows? But I still, like, having said all of that, and as you talk about it, making calls and setting up sites, it still comes back to the context problem. Because if there's not some sort of supervisor that can understand holistically what's been going on and what is going on and has a good handle of all that without being gullible or hallucinating, it just reaches that tipping point where the first 25% is amazing, and then after that, as we've seen, it completely and utterly loses the plot.
Yes, and I think the other thing is the context poisoning. We've discussed this before, where you're onto a good thing with a particular, say, let's call it a chat session with an agent, and it's answering a question. It knows exactly what the problem is, so it can answer your questions reliably. Then all of a sudden you ask it a non sequitur question, something off topic, or you ask something in the wrong way, it produces some bad output. Now suddenly it's not giving the right answers and the context is wrong, and you know that, and you really want to get back to the point where you were before. Now, that's fine in an interactive session, which is how we're all using LLM technology at the moment. But when it comes to setting an autonomous task off, doing things on your behalf, or doing, a task that with O3 might cost you $3,000 to execute, you can't have it accidentally poisoning its own context and then just going off on one and getting totally crazy, something we've seen all large language models do in certain situations. So I really do feel like the whole idea of context management, memory management, probably isn't talked about enough in terms of its role in the future of AI agents.
Yeah, and maybe that's because the labs, I don't know, are sitting on a solution where they think they've already solved it, but it just doesn't feel like that to me, because even using O1 a fair bit, I don't feel like it's any closer on the context problems. It still suffers from the same context problems that, say, Sonnet would after a lengthy discussion. Like, it just seems
the only difference is it's slower because you just can't iterate with it as quickly.
Yeah, for most common problems, it's just way slower, and then you kind of wonder, all that extra compute, are you really getting that big of a benefit at the end of a day? I know a lot of people like it because it seemingly can, output a lot greater content. But if that output problem can be solved in a model that's tuned better, like a Sonnet, then it does make you question, for a daily driver at least, why would you ever really go to it unless you have some sort of really hard problem?
Yeah, I think it raises a wider point that I keep thinking about in terms of, do I want an AI model that tries to encapsulate everything into a single request? Because it seems to be the way O1 and O3 are moving, in the sense that, okay, you give it all the available tools, you give it all the available context, it goes off for 11 minutes or whatever time period, doesn't matter if it fully solves the problem, and solves the problem, and that's it. Bang, you've got your answer. It's done all the reasoning. All that happens behind the theater screen. You worry your pretty little head about it. I'll sort this out for you. Here's the answer, right? As opposed to an agentic system that does things like its own context management. It stores things in a database. It does the tool calls, perhaps with another model, brings those results back, iterates, sends that back to the LLM, and then again at the end spits out the answer. Maybe I prefer the second model just because I have more insight into the process and more control over the different elements of that process. But I just wonder which model's better, or are they just the same thing, just presented in different ways?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So let's touch on O3 because I did joke on the last day of the 12 days over on X. Someone said, "What did William mean by this creating hype? Tomorrow is going to change nothing. Tomorrow is going to change everything," the OpenAI research scientist said. And I wrote, "Safety blog post would be best ending possible," thinking there's no way the last announcement could be anything regarding safety. But it was. They previewed O3. They told us how good it benchmarked. No one can use it, of course. And they announced a blog post on early access for safety testing. So the last day announcement was literally a blog post about safety. So I was right. My prediction was right. But they did announce O3, and it's a big boy. Like at least on the benchmarks, it looks pretty amazing.
Well, it would have to be, because personally, I'm not that impressed with O1 in terms of its thinking ability. So we added a thinking ability to Sim Theory, which is basically an iterative model for prompting and reprompting a model, getting it to look at the problem from different perspectives and then synthesize a final answer. So our answer to how we think O1 is working internally, basically. And to that extent, Gemini, whatever it's called, the Gemini thinking model. And you find that you get kind of similar results from doing it through the iterative thinking style versus O1. And I have been using the AI extensively lately for both development work and other things I've been doing. And I never find myself going to O1 because I simply don't think the answers are necessarily that much better, just in my own personal preferences and the kinds of problems I'm trying to solve. And I feel like O3, okay, yeah, benchmarks are one thing, but I haven't found in my own experience that the benchmarks necessarily translate to real world usage so well, because they're well defined problems. Now, I don't want to dismiss them outright. I'm sure it is better, like if they're comparing it to apples for apples comparisons. But I guess my point is, does it get us any further towards the vision we're talking about of a set and forget kind of agent where you can get it to go do the whole shebang for you for a given task? And if so, what are those tasks?
I think though it's interesting they're honing in on a lot of the problems that we've talked about on the show before, which is these models already have so much potential and so much data encapsulated in their weights that like there's so much in there, and we as humans are just pretty bad at prompting them, right? Like it's taken me a good, I'm still probably not as good as I'll ever be, but like years, quite frankly, of working with these things to get good at prompting them and having a style of working with it that I'm happy with now. And I don't want to say I'm stuck in my ways in that style, but I've kind of found the best way to work with AI to get what I need. And I'm sure everyone listening can relate to that.
Well, I can relate to that so strongly. Like lately, I actually find myself that I've changed my workflow completely. I actually take the time now to grab pieces of context. So let's say it's a page of code, it's some documentation, it's snippets of things that are examples, and then I give it a to-do list, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbered, and then maybe some do this, don't do this. So I might spend 5 to 10 minutes crafting a single prompt to my agent, which already knows my preferences and already knows the project I'm working on and things like that. But I'll still take that time because the answer I get, I know with the same model will just be so much better and so much more likely to fully solve my problem, or at the minimum tell me what the next thing to do is or the next step in the process. And I find that doing that, I can work with most of the models that are out now and get excellent results and be able to work with it all day long.
Yeah, and I think that
But
what O3 is at least presenting, and I guess O1, the earlier version of that, is this idea of doing what you were saying earlier, which is when you're querying it, it's creating a bunch of these, what they call like candidate solutions, trying to figure out, okay, these are all the things that could potentially solve the problem. And then it goes off and tries them, which is why the compute expense is so high. I think in the in the testing of it on, I forget, the Arc AGI, was $20 a task, right? Like $20 for each task. And then when they had the $2,000 per task, that's when they jumped their Arc AGI score from 75 to 87%. So it is somewhat agentic already in that model in a kind of way by going off and testing all of these different ways to get the right outcome.
What I'd love to know though is like, how is it varying its approaches? Like, what is it doing given it's the same underlying model? How is it using its different thinking hats or whatever to get better results from the same context information?
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand, but I know it's going down and basically searching the different pathways that it can to get to get a result.
It just seems to me like something that I would find personally more useful is an agentic system that is able to do the process that I just described. So I can say, okay, I'm working on this system. I need to be able to understand the loading states that are happening on the back end and show them in a progress updater on the front end. And it's able to go off, go through my code base, find the files that are relevant to that, work out what libraries or whatever are available to it, and prompt it, and then go in and give me either the code snippets to update or do it itself. Like, and I just don't see how an iterative model, and I know this is a problem very specific to myself, but to me, it's the context gathering part of that problem that leads to the best solution. And no matter how many iterations you do, and no matter how advanced your model is, if you're not able to gather the full context, you're not going to be able to solve the problem.
Yeah, I think it's more accuracy that they're probably going for with it, because there's a great blog post that explains it. I'll link to it in the show notes, but it says at inference time, the model conducts a search over token spaces, resembling techniques like Monte Carlo tree search. So it's essentially just like they've built a search engine on top of a great model to figure out these different ways of completing things. But as you say, like without it being, to get it to an agentic level, you'd really want it to go off and gather the context, know do that process that you as a human are doing now. And if they can solve that, then it's going to get scary good.
Yeah, and I guess to sort of contradict myself there is, I guess I'm talking about problems where I know that the models are always capable of giving a correct answer, or almost always if given the right context. And I guess the problems they're trying to solve are ones where it isn't always giving the right answer, even when given all the available information, right? So the more advanced mathematics and physics problems and things like that, where even with all the information, some of the models can't solve it. So it makes sense to me that they would need that to solve the more difficult problems. And there's probably listeners to our podcast who have difficult problems like that who need this.
Well, do they though? So in its current formation, I'm talking about what's currently been announced, not the future. Obviously, like cost and things like that will go down. But right now, they're saying tasks can take up to 13 minutes to process, with costs exceeding 1,800 USD per task in high performance mode. So in its O3's highest performance mode right now, today, $1,800 per task, 13 minutes to process. I guess the question is commercially, is what what magical query is worth 13 minutes and $1,800 per task? Like what would you have to get in return for that to be worth it as a business, or like in the enterprise? Like what? Can you think of anything?
So you posed this question to me prior to the podcast, and I thought it through. And when I first thought about it, I went to all the obvious things you might say, like, okay, preparing a legal defense, or doing a financial analysis of a company. But then I thought, I don't do those things. Like, that's not my industry. I don't have experience. So I thought, okay, I have experience in software as a service. What would I, as like a CTO of a company, be willing to pay for? So I thought of examples. And the first example I thought was, we recently did an audit for a government grant that we had to sort of justify the various things we'd claimed. And that involved going through, all of our relevant evidence for that, the government guidelines, what we'd written, what their questions were, and synthesizing that into a series of answers that fit the prompt. Right now, I thought, if I was able to, even if I had to marshal all the context myself, which is no problem, and it was able to go off and think for 11 minutes and then output enough data, and this is where I think it would fall down, that it answered all of those questions, I would absolutely pay $3,000 for that. And 11 minutes, shit, yeah. Even if it takes you a day, I don't mind, right? Like that would be absolutely incredible. But my current thinking is that it wouldn't be able to do that even with how well it's benchmarking, because it's simply, I haven't seen a single model that is able to output nearly enough that it could satisfy that task, for
What if
example.
it methodically worked through it and you could handle the context? But again, this seems to me like a tool that someone could
Yeah.
could still
Again,
build
it's
right
it's a
now. Like,
it's you could build it with the existing models now, and it would all be about that context management. And quite frankly, the human right now is the system that is doing that. It's
mm.
going, okay, question 3, now let's answer that. Make sure it has all the right context, copy paste that out, whatever. And I'm sure everywhere there's people building systems for various industries to do this kind of thing. It makes total
And that
sense,
brings
right?
me to the point I really wanted to make on this show is that at least when these companies spruik about agents, I think what comes to mind for most people, and even when we released computer use on Sim Theory, like a really early alpha of that model with a computer in the cloud that could go off and try and do tasks for you, and hopefully eventually in the background, you have this dream of like, oh, it can just do anything. It's like this magic black box. Like that's kind of what you think when you first at least start trying to use it. But then you soon realize that you've got to get good at, again, context management and prompting it and getting it to do things. So I think that if you can build at least or train agents that are good at a particular task, which is I think what's going to happen at least initially, then it starts to make a bit more sense. Like, oh, I've got my like audit or accountant style agent that can go off and do accounting tasks in like Xero or whatever accounting app I'm using, and it reports back to me and it can actually complete tasks. So that's a really useful thing. So I want to hang on to that, but it would need training. Like someone has to sit down with that agent and say, hey, here's this task, here's that task, here's roughly how you do these tasks and what success looks like, what
Yeah.
that feedback looks like, what the reward is, for that particular task for the model.
Or
So,
the threat.
or the threat. So to me, like that's probably where we're going to be at in 2025 is like you sitting down, in your AI workspace and going, I'm going to create 4 agents to do these quite repetitive tasks that I don't want to do anymore. And I want to be able to send off, get it to go off in the background, take as long as it needs, and get those tasks done for me. I think that's probably where we can get to this year. It's definitely not like, hey, Nvidia girl, I'm going to drag a bunch of files to you. Like now go and create a web business
Yeah.
that makes me money.
Yeah, great example. And I totally agree with you. It's all about what the original vision of GPT-3 was. It's a multi-shot learner. Like you give it 4 or 5 examples of how to do something, and then it does a really good job of it. And really, we're just talking about having that on a wider perspective. So I give it 4 or 5 examples of how to do something. I give it the ability to construct a really good prompt and a really good context, then the ability to evaluate and deliver those results by interacting with external systems, and on the input side, external systems too. And that an agent? And then to me, that's not really an agent, that's a system using AI, right? And then the agent is really the thing that decides when to use that system and decides we will invoke that system. And really, to me, the agent is like the master of tools. It is the thing that is operating all of these different things for you, because otherwise you just have made better tools that the human then operates. To me, the next step is that you move yourself one level above that, and you're the commander who is commanding the agents to operate all of these AI based tools. And I really feel like we're going to get there this year. Like, I think that is on the way. And that's why I really struggle to see how these thinking models like O3 fit into that perspective. Because let me give you an example. We have code mode coming for Sim Theory, which is really about, can I build websites, games, full blown programs, React components, whatever it is you want to build programmatically. Now, a huge part of that system is context and prompt construction, is directing the best models or all the models into asking for the right thing. It's sort of like the Bible, ask and you shall receive. Well, you better be sure you ask for the right thing. It's totally the case where it's all preparation. The actual output is just basic stuff for the LLM models. It's really about preparing that really does all the work. Now, I would argue that the iteration and the thinking side of things for a lot of what people are talking about with AI agents just isn't that important. It's almost like they're bringing the technical side of it into our face when we don't really need to know that in terms of people who are working with the AI systems.
Yeah, I would agree there. Like, to me, and again, like, we're only seeing the picture of the tools that are available and what we have available at hand. But the picture right now is, as you say, sort of like getting the context right, getting the best out of the models, and a lot of that is getting the models to help you get the best out of them. So it's somewhat, iterative, like a thinking model, just at a like more manual level. And then at the back end, verifying the output, like being like, is this actually what the user wanted, or does this sort of fulfill the goal that the original supervision had? And what's interesting to me about it is when you look at Google's, I think, deep think or thinking mode or whatever they're calling it, the research one where it goes off and searches like 100 websites at a time and comes back. A lot of people in the community, and I said this when we talked about it a couple of shows back, or maybe one show back now, was that it's very gullible. Like, it will just read those sources and come back to you and give you the verbatim print of what was said on any of those websites. Like, there's no critical thinking step. And so to me, that's where the sort of agent workflow right now can address some of those issues, where you have something going, okay, let's sort of take a little while to think this through and look at alternative viewpoints and come to a consensus. But even then,
it's like, tell me something I haven't heard before. Like, if it's just coming back with what you already know about something, then really it's only useful when it's so much information that you couldn't understand it yourself. Like, which it already can do. Like, if I give it 1,000,000 words and it can isolate the relevant parts for me, that's incredibly useful, even if it's predictable. But when it comes to solving novel problems or inventing new solutions to problems, I want it to do stuff I wouldn't have ever thought of.
well, look at the financial analyst use case. Like, there's a lot of talk about how analysts aren't being hired anymore because of AI tools. And I can totally see them being way more efficient, so you need less of them with the tools that are available. But think about research, right? Like, if you really do have a research tool going and giving you a one-pager on a company right now with those tools, it's just going to come back and spit the consensus back to you with sources from like mainstream stuff, right? Like the first 20 page of Google results, which might have been hijacked by SEO. So you're just getting back kind of what you would expect. There's no contrarian opinion. There's no like, hey, look over here, no one's looking there, which is the expectation you would have for AI systems in the future, right?
And I actually think the best example of this that we've experienced consistently throughout the testing of LLM models is the horse racing stuff, right? Because I've tried it on all of the models. And what I've realized over time is it'll basically do exactly what you described. If a horse has the highest rating and on average the best history at that track and distance, it's going for that horse. It's never saying, hey, this one that it's 13-1, but I reckon there's some dodgy shit going on at this track. And or it's the last race of the day, they're probably going to try and slip one through. Like, it's not strategizing, it's not thinking, it's simply not diluting, what do you call it, concentrating the information down, or distilling the information down into what it thinks is the most relevant points. And that's probably what it's trained to do, but that isn't thinking. That's following a set process with a set piece of information.
Yeah, I just don't buy the thinking thing. Like, I don't think these things are actually really... I don't know. I don't want to get into definitions around thinking and the human brain and stuff, but it just doesn't feel right now. And I know feelings aren't like, you can't measure them.
But I think the point here is that I do think it is capable of thinking when prompted in the right way. So I guess what I'm saying is like when I work with the AI throughout the day, it is thinking about the problems because I am prompting it to think in certain ways. So whether you call that thinking or not, or maybe all the thinking and creativity is coming from my side, but when I iteratively work with AI throughout the day, I am getting it to take things from different angles. I'm giving it new access to new pieces of information and things like that and going, hey, how about we try this, let's try it from this perspective. Like every now and then I'm like, hey, you're off the rails here, this is way too complicated, let's simplify things, something like that, right? Now what I'm saying is an interactive multi-agent system that is capable of stimulating thought like that would right now be capable of that level of thinking, at least without me as the human in the mix. And I feel like the AutoGen or whatever those early systems were kind of onto the right idea in terms of having different agents with different roles in the system. And as the models are getting better, I think those kind of systems will start to work better. So I guess what I'm saying is if these bigger thinking models are able to do that themselves internally, then that's fantastic. But I really do feel like it's got to be this sort of multi-agent system that stimulates the proper thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's really what they're trying to do maybe with O3, right? Is just prompting itself like the human would. Like that's how they're trying to train it. But because that's done at the training time, that like prompt path or problem solving path, with the reward being like the actual chain of thought to get it to that like correct grounded result, then it's sort of set in stone. So it's like the thinking's kind of, it's pre-built thinking. So if it's trained on that kind of thinking or that problem solving, that's why I think you see it benchmark so well at those things, right? Because it's been trained how to think in that domain. But what we're saying with an agent is your expectation is like, go and find me a stock I should invest in that no one's thinking about. Like it's not going to be able to do that because it's not, you know, maybe that pathway is not baked in at the time of training because you're just getting that verbatim sequence. But I think if you built an agent, and this is why agent building, I think in the next maybe 2 years will be a real thing. You could build an agent right now that could go off and at least source and synthesize things and look for opportunities. And there's some people out there obviously doing this already to find that stock. It's just not going to be this magic box that everyone seems to think.
Yeah, and I guess that you've made the point far more elegantly than I did, but I guess that's what I'm saying is like I see these things as being multi-part systems that accomplish a goal like that. So to expand on your example there, you might have one that is using search information that's searching all the stock websites, all the relevant news, it's looking at price information, and then it's going, within this, I'm going to use this rubric of criteria to identify potential opportunities. Then your phase 2 agents are looking at those opportunities and filtering them out based on different criteria to filter it down even more. And then you've got your ones that are looking at the current, you know, mix of stocks you're invested in and looking at opportunities that fit within that framework. And so you have different styles of thinking that get you down into the final opportunity. So at the very least, the human is only really deciding between a sort of shortlist. It's almost like a recruiter does when you're trying to hire really advanced executives, right? They go through the process where they start with 1,000, they get down to 100, they interview some of them, and then they get down and they're like, okay, here's the 3 best ones, you pick between it, you know, that kind of thing. And I really feel like that's where AI shines because it's able to go off and do this work, yes, for a little bit of money, but it's far more valuable to spend your money on that than all the time doing it yourself and potentially.
But even now, like back to your audit example before, like you've got a Word document or a spreadsheet or whatever with a page of questions. If you can say now in the sort of AI workspace paradigm, hey, can you go off now and fill those 6 questions in the document based on what we've discussed? To me, it's not fully agentic. It's like still somewhat, there's like the manual completion, but it's going off and doing that busy work that quite frankly, you don't want to do, like cutting and pasting things into a document, checking it for good grammar and spelling, checking that it satisfies the requirements. Like, already, I think we're at a point where it's time for those things to be background tasks and just get it done in the
Yeah.
background for me. Like, I don't want to do that. You go off and do it. And I think that's the start of it.
Yeah, and it's the idea of it being able to complete novel tasks. So I've given you all the information, I've given you the criteria. Here's what I'd like you to do. And then from that point on, you no longer need to instruct it. It's like, okay, I have all the tools I need at my disposal. I'm going to come up with a strategy and get this thing done. And like you say, it goes off and executes in the background. There's maybe a bit of human in the loop if it truly gets stuck on something that it can't figure out. But it can do the rest itself. And I think if we get to that point, and I think we will this year, that's going to be a significant step forward, regardless of the progress of the models.
Yeah, to me, that's where AI workflows become really like there's the haves and have nots. Like, if you're not at that point using an AI workflow and you've got a bunch of background tasks running with an agent going off and doing work, like, you're just going to be so much more productive at that point that it's going to start making like the non-AI person in an organization look like, you know, a horse and cart versus an automobile. Like, I think that
and organizations who are leveraging that technology instead of spending all of their money on wages, you know, like, I
Yeah.
think that'll start to become a real thing soon, where, okay, I don't need to have a compliance person because I'm able to do it by just providing all of the information to the AI, and it can log into the website and do all the compliance checklists and crap for me. Like, that's real. I mean, we've seen it with the workspace computer that we provided as an alpha in Sim Theory. Everybody's doing their company mandated security training using these workspace computers very successfully, myself included.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a small example, but it's real. And we know that there hasn't been that much investment in work in those kind of tasks yet. With a little bit more investment and a little bit more time spent on that technology, and the amount of things it's able to do competently will expand quadratically, because there'll be so many multipliers. As it gains more tools, it'll be able to use those tools to do, you know, more and more stuff.
I guess one thing I'd say to you, right, is like daily driver wise, and we'll get to Deepseek in a minute. I'm still using Claude Sonnet. Like, I'm use it, I'd say 80-90% of the time. I sometimes switch to the XAI Grok model because I just like how smooth it is. And other
It's
times,
aesthetically pleasing, as we've discussed. I
yeah.
agree.
And O1 is my like, I've gotten stuck on a problem. I need a different perspective, and I use it as like this sort of like last ditch effort. But I think if we're just looking back at 2024 and the models we've gotten and the models we potentially are getting, like an O3, you know, at this kind of expensive paradigm of $1,400 a task or whatever it is on high performance mode, it's probably not something that people like us are going to incorporate into an agent builder for individuals or businesses, right? Because it's just the paradigm's way too expensive right now, to be clear. And so I think, well, why is everyone saying 2025 is the year of agents? Are they seeing something that we're not? Or, you know, is it just that the tooling and the approaches are getting better and the models are getting better at operating a computer, and there's new open source paradigms like the model context protocol that are going to enable us to deliver the vision of these background agents that can go off and actually do meaningful work for you? Like, is that what's changed?
I think it's two things. I think one, there's been a little bit more time now. So people have had time to sink their teeth in and work out how they're going to approach implementing it. And then I think second is there has been a real and definite slowdown in the leaps and bounds that the models are actually making. And so people are realizing, okay, it actually is worth investing in building agentic systems, because if you look at it for a while there, OpenAI was up there on the stage, you know, ranting and raving about how, you know, oh, we can't even control it. It's so dangerous. It's so unsafe. We don't want to let it out on the world because it might accidentally bring down the water system and you'll have sewage in your pipes because of the AI or whatever. And so people are like, oh shit, look, let's not build this thing. Let's hold off a bit, because if this model really can do that, then this will all be a moot point, right? And we've talked multiple times. We've said it on many startups, like many podcasts, like, oh, they just wiped out 60 startups, you know, with that announcement. And so I feel like the fact that there's been all the talk without the delivery of major advancements in the models, people have realized, okay, we need to build now. And early last year, we said everybody is quiet because they are building stuff. And I really feel like everybody is realizing what I described earlier, which is right now we've got really good systems where you as the human can put all the right stuff in, and get some really good output and help get your task done that way. And there's certain bespoke systems that will do that for your industry. The next step is having a little AI worker that is going to do, as you describe it, the boring, mundane, repetitive task for you on a schedule when necessary, when an event happens. So I get an email, it's got an invoice attached. The process used to be open the invoice, go check the bank account to see if the payment has been received, reconcile that payment, send an email to the customer thanking them, something like that. That can now be an agentic task that is on demand. Then I have another one. Every Thursday, I have to produce the TPS reports, and that requires logging into this website. It requires downloading this information, performing some analysis, producing the report, sending it to Jeff in marketing, whatever it is. That can be done by an agent now. And again, I don't know if agent's the right word for that because it's really just an automated AI leveraged task, right? But I feel like these are the next step. Like this is what they were talking about in the Nvidia presentation with their Nemotron stuff. And I just think we're going to see so much of that this year. And then the step beyond that is going to be the AIs themselves orchestrating it based on more abstract goals.
Yeah, and to me, it's just so obvious. There's so many developments that need to be made based on that like abstract goal vision that I do agree with you. I think there's a couple of years before that becomes a reality. I think it'll happen 100%. I just think it's probably like 3 or 4 years away before it's scarily good in that way. And the interim's going to be more about retraining ourselves as individuals to leverage the AI at the right time to go off and get it to do things in the background for us and have multiple tasks and multiple things we're doing in play at the same time. I'm just not so sure that how that plays out is the embodiment of, like the early days where everyone thought, oh, I have my contract agent or whatever. I kind of still think you'll be working with a master sort of like your main, your AI girlfriend, like your main.
My AI girl. You said it to me the other day. You said, how often do you switch agents?
Yeah.
Like how often do you actually switch? And my answer is never. I have Patricia, my flirty AI girlfriend, and that's who I work with all day, every day on all sorts of problems.
I don't know.
And,
I said that to you last year, but I think it was because I was just like so tunnel vision working. But over the break, I must admit, like I have Dr. Kepler, my doctor, who has my medical history in her memory. And I work with that agent all the time because I like to isolate the memory she has.
Yes, but as we discussed, this is about memory portability and context production. It's not about specific agent stuff, right? Like it's really about the sort of context we're working in more than anything. And you feel like they could be separate entities.
I think there's probably two approaches. One way is where you're working with the core, and then it's like I'll go consult Kepler on this, and that way you still get the sort of memory context management that we're talking about. And then in the future, it's like I'll get Kepler to go off and work on a diagnosis for you or something and get back to me. I think that's probably something that is a way of handling it. Or the other way is like I have a specialist process task for that. I'm just going to go off and handle that and get back to you. But I don't know. I feel like sometimes we get criticized on the show for being all like negative. Like some people are like, unless we play the hype boy role, they get really upset with us in the comments sometimes. But for me personally, it's just looking at this from a quite a calm, like just a sense of reality, like actually working with what is available right now. Like what as developers and technologists and everyone listening on the show that likes to build things, what can we actually build today? Like what are the things that are capable? And I think if you ground yourself in reality of saying like, some of these things are achievable now. And as you said earlier, we do have the calmness now of saying, well, these models are stabilizing around like this certain level, at least the non-thinking ones from a benchmarking point of view, let's say. Again, we'll get to Deepseek in a moment because I think that's an interesting thing to talk about. But the part of it is that there's that calmness of knowing these models are pretty good at this stuff. They're going to get better in these areas. So now I can go off and actually build a pretty focused agentic system on a business problem, and that's going to be really beneficial, and I can make money from that. That's a new paradigm. Like I do fundamentally believe that maybe the business model is still relatively like SaaS or like a task-based business model, but I am a big believer that there's these agentic businesses that can now be built. Obviously the best example of that is Devon. Joking. But
no, I really think the best businesses will come from people who deeply understand processes in their industries and are able to best apply this technology to it. To me, those are the biggest opportunities of people who look at current systems that are in place where either people can be replaced or existing processes can be replaced, or ideally both, with AI. Like, I know I'm the one talking about bringing down humanity for AI, but that's sort of part of the job, right? And I really feel like that is where you will see the biggest businesses evolve, is where someone is able to successfully replace key parts of industries with agentic systems. Like it's coming everywhere.
yeah, and I think that people probably are already using some form of early agentic system, whether they realize it or not. One of the things that we've done with our holiday update, which I know it's not really the holidays anymore, but it is coming, I swear. We've built this capability we've been talking about for a while, and we're calling it Create with Code, one modality of it, where to help, again, focus the context and focus the prompting, we have different skills. So one might be like make a game, make a data visualization. And one of the things I did, because there's pretty shocking fires at the moment, as I'm sure many are aware, in California, where Chris and I lived for a number of years, I think like 8 years. So all these places, seeing them burn down is shocking to you. And one thing I was interested in is like, what are other, deadly and destructive fires that occurred? So I Googled it. It had a PDF from Cal Fire, and I was able to, in this new Create with Code mode, do this visualization of it. And I'll bring it up on the screen now for those that watch. It's essentially like a Google Maps like project where it plotted from the PDF, just data in the PDF itself, all of the fires with emojis on a map of California, or like a world map with zoom out. And then I got it to state by the acres burned, do like a red ring around it to show how impactful that fire was in terms of just acres burned. And I was able to quickly visualize all of that Cal Fire data in a custom application that worked on mobile, that you could embed onto like a news website if you wanted to explain concepts to people. And how this relates to agents is, I think we're already kind of starting to use some of these agentic capabilities where behind the scenes, from your simple prompt, what is going on in the background is very agentic. Like the AI models and several, models and factors to this are making decisions to get to this output point incredibly quickly and sort of infer a lot of the things that you might want done as a result of it. So it's not like a single shot approach here. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. And I'm curious, like, do you agree with this? Do you think this is some form of early agentic capability? Because to me, when I look at this, it's like this is something that an agent technically is going off and producing in the background and then coming back to me and validating works correctly.
It sure feels like it. Like, this is the working with this stuff. And I know it's been a long time coming, but it really feels like magic again. Like some of the stuff we've been creating using it is like proper exciting, and it comes up with some really amazing stuff. I think the real signs of agenticness will be when the agents are creating tools like this as a step towards solving an overall problem. So it actually uses code mode to build something, and then it uses that tool that it's built to get more information or evaluate something or try something, experiment with something, and then uses that data that's generated from that to therefore solve the wider problem or several things like that. So I do think it's a step in that direction. Absolutely.
And if you go deeper
when
into
viewed from
this, like if you look at like VO and like all these other sort of like scaffold building capabilities, and when we release this, I'll talk about why I think it's a little bit different around like asset generation and just like tying a bunch of different skills together. But the the interesting part of this for me, right, is that the secret sauce in these agentic-like applications, like take VO or whatever, is, some of these are trained on or fine-tuned on a lot of UI examples or the expected output of the user. And then they're chaining together different prompts and different tools and capabilities to get to that initial output. So we sort of think, oh, it's single shot, it's magically building like a dashboard interface for me. But really behind the scenes, there's a lot more going on. So I would think
and that's not even taking into account things like being able to drag in existing code, being able to drag in an image or a PDF. Like I posted an example in the This Day in AI Discord where I took a screenshot of a bank's homepage and then posted the screenshot into SimTheory's code generator and said, replicate this landing page for me. And then it made basically a perfect copy of the bank's login page. Maybe not the best example of doing that, but the idea that you can leverage all of the existing AI tools, like take a video, like you can paste a video or an image or a song and be like, add this as the background music, or make a photo gallery with these images. And so we're using all of the existing technologies to, again, build a great context so you get better output. And so, I guess that's the thing, like, where they always say that any technology seems like magic until it becomes commonplace and then no one thinks it's magic anymore. But you look at this tool and what it's capable of, and a few years ago, you would have been like, this is the best thing ever created.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, there's sort of that early agentic tools already being built out there, right? Like there's Bolt, there's VO, like there's a ton of them, right? All doing this kind of thing. And so I think that's sort of like the V1. V2 is probably like we were saying, where it can go off in the background and actually complete and validate a task that's useful to you. Maybe not groundbreaking or doing anything terribly novel, but at least handling novel scenarios where it's encountering like an email and then deciding like what to do from that and things like that. And then I think the third is, which I really want to experiment with because I'm obsessed with the idea, is the autonomous nature of it, where it's always on and sitting and it keeps clearing its context and regrounding itself to complete a task that needs an always on capability, like, watching a video feed of like a security camera, or manning an inbox on like, an old legacy system that you just can't interact with an API. So
yeah, and I think also the big one for me as well is interruptible. Like I can ring it up, I can text it and be like, actually, I need the TPS report by Tuesday this week. Get it over to me.
Get
something
it done.
like that.
Man, I hope on the show this year we can demonstrate you calling an agent and being like, get it done, and it just responds okay, and then it actually does get it done. That would be...
I still like the idea as well of adding UI elements for like toggle on, like threaten grandma, like offer a $10,000 reward, and like you just toggle them on and off.
Oh, so good.
So you don't have to re-threaten each time.
So one thing that dropped when we were off, but we do have in SimTheory if you want to try it out, but you can also try it out on their actual website, deepseek.com and various other places, is Deepseek v3 was announced. Fully open source, but not, I think they were going to release like fully open source, but I don't think it's actually happened yet. But it's Deepseek version 3. It's a mixture of experts model. I think that's kind of interesting. We don't really know with GPT-4o and Claude 3.5 what type of model they are. As you can see from the comparison up on the screen I have, it beats like Sonnet on a number of different benchmarks. In theory, it beats GPT-4o. So you could call this a frontier model, and it's available on GitHub. Like you can download and run the model, and so it's a pretty big deal. Karpathy tweeted about it saying, DeepSeek making it look easy today with an open source weights release of a frontier grade LLM trained on a joke of a budget, 248 GPUs for 2 months, $6 million. So extremely cheap.
$6 million. Yeah, I spend that kind of stuff on, just on sushi.
For reference,
So,
this level of capability is supposed to require clusters of closer to 16K GPUs. The ones being brought up today are more around 100K GPUs, e.g. Llama 3 405 billion parameter model used 30.8 million GPU hours, while Deepseek version 3 looks to be a stronger model at only 2.8 million GPU hours.
Well, I can tell you now, it's stronger than Llama. Like,
Oh,
absolutely,
way
when it
stronger,
comes to
yeah.
producing code. Like, the code mode in sim theory is quite complicated in terms of the prompts that's given, because there's just several things that it absolutely must take into account. And you find that the weaker models really struggle with those kind of things to do them consistently or to do them in novel situations. Whereas DeepSeek V3, absolutely zero problems with that kind of thing. I would argue it may not produce the best output, but that may be a prompt tuning thing. But in terms of its ability to instruction follow, to write code, to update existing code, it's interchangeable. Like, you can definitely use it as a daily driver for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I did for days and forgot. I thought I was on Sonnet. Like, I just thought I was on Sonnet the entire time. I did not notice at all. The things I would say though is it's good at like mathematical code type stuff, which I was working at the time. As soon as you get back into sort of creative writing or like filling in legal questions or whatever I was doing at the time, that's when you start to notice that this is a different model. Do you think though the constraints of being a model producer in China are going to lead though to more efficient building because they don't have access to the hardware that they've got an older version of these GPUs, so they're having to be like way more efficient, spend way less money to produce a very frontier capable model. So it seems to me like the restrictions the West is actually putting on them are making them more efficient at producing AI models of this like frontier capability. So I think it's kind of ironic by restricting them.
Well, it also, like, if you think about it, the sort of second order thinking there is, okay, well, if they can make a model that's almost as good with way less hardware, why can't someone with way more hardware make something that's double as good? And so
Yeah.
it actually sort of is evidence in a way that they may be hitting limits in terms of the current training techniques of where they can get to with the models. Like, if you can't make it way better with like orders of magnitude more hardware, then really it's a problem about the algorithms creating it or the training techniques creating it rather than the actual hardware limitations.
Yeah, it's also got 128K context. However, if you consume it through the DeepSeek V3 API, you only get 64K context, which I find strange. It doesn't make any sense.
Providing a lower quality product straight from the source.
But it's extremely cheap from them. Like, I mean, borderline free, you could call it. There's also quantized models that people are running locally and getting really good results as well. So it's super interesting that it's just this like frontier style model that you can run on your own hardware, really. And I don't know what it says with these model providers. Like, it does seem a race to the bottom on this current level of frontier model is going to continue, where they're going to get cheaper and cheaper, better and better. And so again, it probably makes the case that it's time to start building, because the cost of building a very specific agentic app is also just going to come down and down and down.
Yeah, and I think it can change your thinking around, like, not having to do spreadsheets of what's it going to cost us per token to be able to provide this service, or can we really use a model of this level to make such a trivial decision in an application? And the answer is probably, yeah, you can. Like, build for it and just expect that the cost will drop. Because they're definitely going to. I mean, the trend has been that way in almost every respect. And so this idea that we'd spoken about earlier about having like fine-tuned specialized models to make specific decisions just to get the cost down is really not necessary, I don't think. Like, I'm sure there's very fine-tuned situations where you want it to make the best decision, but that's different. If it's simply a cost thing, then there's absolutely no reason to lower your expectations in terms of what you can use right now.
I guess the question always comes down to like, where is this valuable, right? Like, I am probably not going to run it through their API because they're going to train on those outputs. They say that. So like, that scares me a lot. And then I can consume it through something like Together AI, right? Through an API if I don't want to host it myself. But then that's going to cost me almost as much as running like a Sonnet, which I trust way more, right? And I think creatively it still has better outputs. Like, its tune, I think, is still better, despite Deepseek, obviously training on the outputs of Claude and GPT-4o. Like, it's just so obvious they have.
Yeah, but if you're building a commercial system and you're gonna provision your own hardware and run it yourself, like I could absolutely see it fitting into an AI system that's
Oh,
being built
100%.
as just a part of the stack.
Yeah, 100%. I agree there. That's the primary piece. But I think
Yeah, but you're just not going to use it casually.
No, as a daily driver, like if I'm paying my $20 a month to like Claude or Sim Theory or wherever right now, am I gonna like switch over to this thing for that model? Like, no way in hell. Like, it just doesn't make any sense right now. But yeah, I think for like the builder case, sure. But I guess my thing here is like, am I daily driving it? No. But like, can you actually switch to it and not notice for a terribly long time? Yeah, which speaks to how good it is. But I must admit, I stayed on Grok 2 for a couple of days recently, and I don't know, like if you're in like a create with code mode and you're trying to create a game or something, I don't like, or a website or whatever, I don't think it's even close to Sonnet in terms of its tune, but I really like the feel of that model. Like, there's something there, and the rumor is this month we're going to get Grok 3. So if it ups the ante and the tune's better, man, they're going to be a big player. Like that, I can see them being a really big player.
Yeah, I've similarly had great experiences with Grok. Like, I often find myself going to it for a bit of a laugh and just to enjoy something different. And yeah, it definitely stands up with the big boys, that's for sure.
So, onto the rumor mill. We generally don't like to talk about things until they're released, but this is getting a fair bit of pickup. So, there's a few leaks around about OpenAI building, operator or these tasks in a release of ChatGPT, and there's some leaks of the actual UI that people have been able to discover. Things like you've reached your limit for scheduled tasks, to schedule new ones, pause some of your existing tasks, and a few other things around customizing the ChatGPT experience. But more interestingly, the circle logo that leaked, that everyone thought was like the new OpenAI logo, looks just like a sort of pie chart. I forget what you call it, the pie chart with a hole in it, just showing the actual completion of tasks running in the background. So it's clear, even today, after having our discussion about these AI workspaces or agents being able to go off and do things in the background for you, this is the path even OpenAI are going down, where it's like, hey, go off and do this for me, or would you like me to do that in the background? So we'll have to wait and see there what comes out. I
think as systems become capable of doing those asynchronous like tasks, you just simply don't want to sit around waiting for them to complete, especially if you trust that they're able to do that. I will be curious to see if they go beyond just scheduled and repeating tasks and look at sort of event-driven tasks and those kind of things. I mean, it stands to reason that they will.
Yeah, I think it's just cumulatively building to that point. I think they're going to start slow with wide distribution and then slowly build up from there. But this paradigm is coming. Whether or not it'll be game-changing, who knows? I think there's people are just out there trying a lot of ideas and seeing what fits best into people's workflow, and like what's a repeatable thing that they'll use all the time and get benefit out of. So
yeah, and I think circling all the way back to the Nvidia presentation, that definitely is what I got the impression of that presentation. They're sort of like the bowerbird who's brought all the different like colorful twigs back to its nest, and they're just like, hey, look at all this stuff we found. That's really our presentation, is like, yeah, you can do all this stuff.
Yeah, I always think when companies don't have a clear vision on stage, like where they're not standing up like Steve Jobs being like, this is an iPhone, it replaces like your media player and this, and it's a clear articulated vision, right? You know that they have no effing idea how to use this technology. Like, it's so obvious when they get up and just scattergun, like a big shotgun, just shotgun announcements like Google seem to do as well.
Yeah, like the guy, I forget his name, the head of Nvidia, should have gotten up, had a fight to the death with a robot. The robot wins, kills him on stage, and then it sits down and is like, okay, here's how you solve world hunger. And it just lays out a step-by-step plan and then just starts executing it.
All right. On that note, I think we're done
impressive.
Here.
and it does it with a stack of the little mini boxes or whatever they're called.
It's very good to be back. I do have one thing to show you before the show ends. Look what I got. It is an official Sim Theory cap well, like a
And how much
vintage
does it
style
cost?
cap.
$60 US.
All right. First of all, merch store, is it a scam? It did take 2 months to arrive. 2 months. How did it take 2 months to make this? And it's very bad quality, I would say. Like, terrible quality. Like, shocking quality merch. But if you do want one, they're available on this day in AI.
I do want one.
Merch.com,
I do want
think.
one, despite the high cost, long lead time, and terrible quality.
Yeah, I just want to like tell our audience, like, average podcast, very average merch, and very
Imagine how the
average
poor
delivery
bugger who
time.
bought that shower curtain's feeling right now.
He's
His
probably
wife's
still
like,
hasn't got it. I don't think they
So
ever
we-
sent it. If you read the merch store reviews online, it's like most of them are like, it's a scam. It's terrible.
Did you write them?
No, but I should.
I got most of the merch I ordered, I'm pretty sure.
It's a 75% delivery rate. If you do want to support the show, though, consider signing up to SimTheory, simtheory.ai, and join our community, thisdayinai.com. If you're on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, there's links in the description below. Chris, it's good to be back. Any final thoughts for the first week back of the year?
Yeah, I'm just excited. I'm rearing to go, like, in terms of where we go to this year. Like, I really think this style of time really suits us, because we really want to have time to test drive and really use everything and see what it's capable of. And so far, we're still discovering new things and getting delighted by it. And that's really what this is all about for me.
I want my autonomous computer agent running in the background doing productive work for me this year. That is my singular goal in life this year. That's all I care about, and I will work nonstop until we have something.
I think we all got a taste for it, and I'm definitely excited in exploring the automating a desktop computer far, far more than we already have. Like, I think there's untapped potential there in terms of teaching it. Actually, one other interesting thing in the Nvidia presentation they talked about was their physical world AI stuff, and the idea of demonstrating to an AI, like a physical AI, how to do stuff like put the dishes away or serve your master a slaver of cucumber sandwiches or whatever it is. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that multi-shot learning when it comes to things like, say, operating a computer. Like, one of the things we've seen in the feedback from our offering with the virtual computer is that it seems to need to relearn how to do really basic stuff every time. Like, I have to instruct it every time how to, like, open a web page, go here, log in, whatever. To me, there needs to be an accumulation of learned skills in that respect. So it ends up with hundreds or thousands of playbook skills. So it's just like bang, 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 and it becomes really efficient. And I think that's what's missing from the MCP stuff right now that will be coming very soon. And I want to make sure that we're part of that.
Yeah. All right. On that note, we will say goodbye. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.